I found out that my neighbour had entered my house several times while I was at work, so I decided. My name is Faustina, 32 years old, and I work as a financial consultant in a quiet suburb of Boston. I thought I had found the perfect sanctuary, a place where I could feel completely safe. That was until I noticed the subtle signs that someone had been in my house while I was away. The violation of my private space left me feeling vulnerable and exposed. Little did I know that the person invading my home was someone I greeted every day. Let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button and join me as I share how I confronted the stranger who thought my house was his playground. The life I had built for myself was something I took immense pride in. After years of saving and careful planning, I had finally purchased my dream home, a cozy 2-bedroom cottage with a small garden where I could plant my favourite flowers and herbs. The inside was decorated exactly to my taste, with warm colours and comfortable furniture that made coming home after a long day feel like wrapping myself in a soft blanket. My home office was my sanctuary, a place where I could focus on complex financial analyses and client portfolios without distraction. The bookshelves were filled with financial textbooks and novels I hoped to read someday when work slowed down. I had carefully arranged my desk to face the window overlooking the garden, providing the perfect balance of inspiration and comfort. The neighbourhood itself was primarily families who had lived there for years. Most of them were friendly, always offering a wave or stopping for a quick chat when our paths crossed. I didn't spend much time socialising, though. My job at the consulting firm demanded long hours, often leaving early in the morning and returning home well after sunset. About 3 months ago, a new neighbour moved into the house directly across from mine. Jack Anderson was a tall man, probably in his early 40s, with dark hair that was starting to grey at the temples. Unlike the other neighbours, Jack kept to himself. Our interactions were limited to brief nods when we happened to collect our mail at the same time or passed each other on the street. There was something about him that made me uneasy, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Maybe it was the way his eyes lingered a little too long when we spoke, or how he seemed to appear outside his house whenever I was leaving or arriving home. I brushed these feelings aside, telling myself I was being unfair to someone who was probably just socially awkward. My daily routine was fairly predictable. I would leave for work around 7 a.m. coffee in hand, and wouldn't return until around 6 p.m. On Thursdays, I would meet my best friend Martha for dinner at our favourite Italian restaurant downtown. Martha was the opposite of me, outgoing, spontaneous, and always looking for adventure. "You should really get a security system," Martha had suggested one evening over pasta. "A single woman living alone needs to think about these things." I had laughed it off. In this neighbourhood, the biggest crime here is Mrs. Peterson letting her dog do his business on everyone's lawn. Martha hadn't seemed convinced, but I was confident in the safety of my little community. Besides, I had Jasper, my orange tabby cat, who greeted me at the door every evening with demanding meows for dinner and attention. He was company enough, and his presence made the house feel less empty. Jasper had been a rescue adopted after my long-term relationship ended 2 years ago. He was particular about his routines, always waiting by the door around 6 p.m, always sleeping on the left side of my bed, and always complaining loudly if I was even 5 minutes late with his food. His predictable behaviour was comforting in its constancy. My house wasn't particularly fancy, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every decorative item had been carefully selected to create the peaceful environment I craved after dealing with demanding clients all day. The kitchen was small but functional, with copper pots hanging above the island and a collection of cookbooks I aspired to use more often than I actually did. The spare bedroom had been converted into a home gym with a yoga mat, some free weights, and a treadmill for rainy days when I couldn't jog outside. I wasn't as dedicated to my fitness routine as I should be, but having the space made me feel like I was at least making an effort. My bedroom was my true haven, a king-sized bed with more pillows than one person could reasonably need, blackout curtains to ensure undisturbed sleep, and a reading nook by the window, where I often found myself dozing off with a book in hand on weekend mornings. The walk-in closet was organized by color and season, a system I maintained with perhaps too much dedication. Life was comfortable, predictable, and exactly how I wanted it. I had worked hard to create this stability for myself after years of uncertainty in my 20s. I never imagined that the sense of security I had so carefully constructed could be shattered so completely by something as simple as a misplaced notebook. It began with small things so insignificant that I questioned my own memory. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, where I had to inform a client that their investment strategy needed serious reconsideration, I came home exhausted. After feeding Jasper and heating up some leftover soup, I went to my office to review some documents for the next day. That was when I noticed my journal wasn't in its usual spot. I always kept it in the right drawer of my desk, but that night it was sitting on top, slightly off-center, as if someone had been reading it and hastily put it back. I frowned, trying to remember if I had left it out that morning. Had I been writing in it before work? No, I hadn't touched it in days. I must be more tired than I thought, I muttered to myself, returning the journal to its proper place. The following week, I noticed more discrepancies. My laptop wasn't positioned at the exact angle I always left it. The throw pillows on my couch seemed rearranged. The bathroom towels were folded differently than my usual method. Each time I convinced myself I was being paranoid or forgetful. It's just the stress, I told myself. You're working too many hours, and your brain is playing tricks on you. But then Jasper started acting strange. My normally affectionate cat began hiding when I got home, sometimes not emerging from his hiding spots for hours. Instead of greeting me at the door, he would be curled up under the bed or behind the washing machine. When I did coax him out, he seemed jumpy, his eyes wide and alert, as if watching for something. "What's wrong, buddy?" I asked him one evening, stroking his fur as he pressed himself against the corner of the couch. "Are you not feeling well?" I even took him to the vet, concerned that his behaviour indicated a health problem, but Dr. Lewis found nothing wrong physically. "Cats can be sensitive to changes in their environment," she suggested. "Has anything changed at home recently?" Nothing had changed, at least nothing I had done intentionally. The incident that finally made me accept something was truly wrong happened on a Tuesday evening. I returned home at my usual time, called for Jasper, who was nowhere to be seen, and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. There on the counter was a glass that was slightly wet inside, as if someone had recently used it and tried to dry it. I knew with absolute certainty that I hadn't used that particular glass that morning. I had taken my travel mug for coffee and nothing else. With shaking hands, I called Martha. "I think someone's been in my house," I said when she answered my voice barely above a whisper, as if the intruder might somehow hear me. "What, are you serious? Did they take anything?" Martha's voice rose with alarm. "No, nothing's missing. It's just things are moved, not where I left them, and today there was a glass that had been used. Faustina, you're scaring me. Maybe you're just tired and not remembering things clearly." I wanted to believe that was the case, but the wet glass was impossible to explain away. "Maybe," I conceded, not wanting to alarm her further. "I'm probably overreacting. Why don't you come stay with me for a few days, take a break from work, get some rest?" The offer was tempting, but something inside me resisted. This was my home. I shouldn't have to leave because of what might be my imagination. "I'll be fine. I'll double-check all the locks tonight." After hanging up, I went through the house, carefully examining every window and door. Everything seemed secure. Maybe the wind had knocked things over. Maybe Jasper was more active when I was gone than I realized. Maybe the glass had water condensation from sitting next to the sink. I tried to rationalize every strange occurrence, but deep down, a nagging feeling persisted. That night, before going to bed, I took photos of how I left various rooms in the house. I placed a small piece of clear tape across the seam of my office door, unnoticeable unless you were looking for it, but it would break if the door was opened. The next morning, I left for work with an uncomfortable knot in my stomach. Throughout the day, I found myself checking the time, wondering what might be happening at my house. Was someone there right now, looking through my things? The thought made me nauseous. When I returned home that evening, my heart sank. The tape on my office door was broken. The photos on my phone showed subtle but definite changes to the arrangement of items on my desk. Someone had definitely been in my house while I was at work, yet I still tried to deny the obvious. Maybe the tape had fallen off on its own. Maybe I had remembered the arrangement of items incorrectly. I was making excuses because the alternative was too frightening to contemplate. But I couldn't ignore the growing pit in my stomach, the feeling that my personal space, my sanctuary, had been violated. Jasper continued to hide, and I found myself jumping at every creak and groan of the house settling at night. My sleep became restless, filled with dreams of shadowy figures moving through my rooms while I was frozen, unable to scream or move. I started leaving work earlier, hoping to catch whoever it was in the act. I varied my schedule, sometimes leaving for a coffee break and returning unexpectedly. Nothing changed. The intrusions continued becoming more obvious. A book from my bedside table appearing in the living room, my collection of seashells rearranged, a lingering scent that wasn't mine, something masculine and unfamiliar. I was living in fear in my own home, and I was running out of excuses to tell myself. The day everything changed started like any other. I woke up, fed Jasper, and prepared for work. But as I was getting dressed, a wave of nausea hit me, likely from the stress and lack of sleep that had become my constant companions. After struggling through my morning routine, I decided to call in sick. It was something I rarely did, but my body was clearly telling me it needed a break. "Take the day, Faustina," my boss said. "Your clients will survive without you for 24 hours. I sent some emails rescheduling my appointments and then took some medicine for my upset stomach. By noon, I was feeling better and decided to use the unexpected free time to run some errands. After a quick lunch and a trip to the dry cleaners, I headed home around 2 p.m., a time when I would normally be in the middle of client meetings. As I turned onto my street, a strange sensation washed over me. There was nothing visibly different about my house from the outside, but something felt off. I parked in my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, observing. Everything looked normal, too normal perhaps. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my things and approached the front door. As I inserted my key into the lock, I noticed it turned more easily than usual, as if it was already partially unlocked. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I pushed the door open slowly, and immediately I knew someone was there, or had been very recently. The house had a different energy, a presence that didn't belong. The air seemed thicker somehow, and there was a scent I didn't recognize. It was subtle, a cologne or aftershave that definitely wasn't mine. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding strange and small in the quiet house. No response. I stepped inside cautiously, my purse clutched tightly against my body as if it might offer some protection. The living room appeared untouched, but as I moved further into the house, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My jewelry box on the dresser was open. This was not something I could explain away. I always kept it closed partly out of habit and partly to keep Jasper from batting at the shiny objects inside. With trembling hands, I approached the dresser. The jewelry box lid was fully open, and I could see immediately that things had been moved around. A pearl necklace that had belonged to my mother, one of the few things I had inherited after her passing last year, was lying on top of everything else when I distinctly remembered placing it in the velvet pouch at the bottom of the box. Someone had touched my mother's pearls. Someone had gone through my most personal possessions. "Jasper," I called out suddenly, remembering my cat. He always came running when I returned home, regardless of the time of day. His absence was alarming. I moved through the house, calling his name in increasingly panicked tones. Finally, I heard a small meow from the bathroom. I pushed open the door to find Jasper crouched behind the toilet, his eyes wide with fear. When I reached for him, he hissed, something he had never done to me before. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered my own fear, making my voice shake. "It's just me." As I was trying to coax Jasper out, I heard it. A soft thud from upstairs. My heart froze in my chest. I wasn't alone in the house. Every instinct screamed at me to run to get out and call for help. But I was paralyzed with fear, crouching on my bathroom floor with my terrified cat. Another sound followed, the unmistakable creak of a floorboard in my bedroom directly above. Someone was walking around upstairs in my house. I forced myself to take a deep, silent breath. I needed to stay calm. Slowly, carefully, I backed out of the bathroom, leaving Jasper in his hiding place. Moving as quietly as possible, I retraced my steps toward the front door. My car keys were still in my hand, clutched so tightly that they were digging painfully into my palm. I made it to the front door without making a sound. Once outside, I ran to my car, fumbling with the keys as I unlocked it and practically threw myself inside. With shaking hands, I locked the doors and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's calm voice was a stark contrast to the panic coursing through me. "Someone is in my house," I gasped. "I came home early from work and there's someone upstairs. I'm outside in my car now. Are you safe where you are? Can the person see you?" "I think I'm safe. I'm in my car with the doors locked." I glanced nervously at the house. "The blinds are closed, so they probably can't see me." "Officers are being dispatched to your location. Please stay on the line with me until they arrive. Can you give me your exact address?" I provided my address and a description of my house. The dispatcher asked me more questions, whether I had seen the intruder, if anything was missing, if I lived alone. I answered mechanically, my eyes never leaving the front door of my house, terrified that at any moment someone would emerge. Within what seemed like both an eternity and mere seconds, 2 police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing, but sirens silent. 4 officers approached 2 heading to the back of the house, while 2 came to speak with me. "Ms. Campbell," one of them, a woman with kind eyes and a stern mouth, leaned down to my car window. "I'm Officer Rivera. Can you tell me exactly what happened?" I recounted everything, coming home early, the unfamiliar scent, the open jewelry box, and the sounds from upstairs. "Is there anyone who should have access to your home, a cleaner, a friend, a family member?" "No one," I said firmly. "I live alone with my cat." Officer Rivera nodded and spoke quietly into her radio. Moments later, the other officers signaled that they were entering the house. Officer Rivera stayed with me, her hand resting reassuringly on the roof of my car. "They'll clear the house room by room," she explained. "You did the right thing by leaving immediately and calling us." We waited in tense silence. I couldn't tear my eyes away from my front door, wondering what was happening inside. What if they didn't find anyone? What if I had imagined the sounds, but I knew I hadn't imagined the open jewelry box or my mother's displaced pearls? I hadn't imagined the fear in Jasper's eyes or the unfamiliar cologne hanging in the air. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Officer Rivera's radio crackled to life. "House is clear," came a male voice. "No one's here now, but we've got signs of forced entry. Looks like someone jimmied the back bedroom window. It's been done professionally, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it." Relief that there was no immediate danger washed over me quickly, replaced by a new wave of horror. Someone had been breaking into my house regularly, probably for weeks. While I was at work, a stranger had been moving freely through my personal space, touching my things, invading my privacy. And they had gotten away before the police arrived. Officer Rivera guided me back into the house where the other officers were examining the compromised window. They took photographs and dusted for fingerprints, but their expressions weren't hopeful. "Whoever did this wore gloves," one of the male officers explained, showing me the lack of prints on the window frame. They knew what they were doing. They took my statement, promised to file a report and increase patrols in the neighborhood, but I could tell from their demeanor that they didn't expect to catch the culprit. Breaking and entering cases without theft or violence were low priority, and without witnesses or clear evidence, there wasn't much they could do. As the officers prepared to leave, the reality of my situation sank in with crushing weight. This wasn't a one-time break-in. Someone had been entering my home repeatedly, moving through my most private spaces, touching my possessions. And they would likely come back. "Is there somewhere else you can stay tonight?" Officer Rivera asked, genuine concern in her eyes. "I could go to my friends," I said numbly, thinking of Martha's offer. "That might be a good idea at least until you can get your locks changed and that window secured properly." After they left, I sank onto my couch, too overwhelmed to cry. Jasper had finally emerged from the bathroom and was cautiously exploring the living room, still on high alert. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would drop everything to help me. "Ryan, it's me. I need your help." My brother Ryan arrived at my house just after 7 p.m., his truck loaded with tools and his face set in the protective big brother expression I remembered from childhood. As soon as I opened the door, he pulled me into a tight hug. "Are you okay?" he asked, holding me at arm's length to examine me as if looking for physical injuries. "I'm not hurt," I assured him, leading him inside. "Just scared and angry and violated." Ryan listened intently as I explained everything, the subtle signs I'd been noticing for weeks, today's discovery and the police response. His expression darkened with each detail. "First things first," he said when I finished, "we're changing every lock in this house tonight." He had brought new deadbolts for every exterior door, plus a reinforced strike plate for the back door, where the lock had been tampered with. As he worked drilling and installing the new hardware, we discussed what else needed to be done. "You need a security system," Ryan insisted, tightening a screw with perhaps more force than necessary. "Not just alarms, cameras, inside and outside the house." "Isn't that expensive?" I asked, holding his toolbox steady. "Not as expensive as you think, especially nowadays. There are wireless systems you can monitor from your phone. You'd be able to see what's happening in your house anytime from anywhere." The thought of being able to check on my home while I was at work was immensely appealing. If I had had cameras installed weeks ago, I would have known immediately that someone was entering my house. I might even have been able to identify them. As Ryan finished with the locks, I made us some coffee, and we sat at my kitchen table to research security systems online. He recommended a setup with outdoor cameras covering all entry points and indoor cameras in the main living areas. "What about privacy?" I asked, uncomfortable with the idea of cameras watching me in my own home. "You can turn the indoor ones off when you're home," Ryan explained. "The point is to see what happens when you're not here." We ordered a system that could be delivered the next day, and Ryan promised to come back and install it. As we worked on securing the house, I found myself thinking about my neighbors. Had any of them seen anything suspicious? Had anyone noticed a stranger entering my house when I wasn't home? "Ryan," I said slowly, "what about my neighbor, the one I mentioned who moved in a few months ago? Jack, what about him?" I explained the uneasy feeling I'd always had around Jack, the way he seemed to know my schedule. How he always appeared to be watching me. "It could be nothing," I admitted, "but he's the only person in the neighborhood I don't really know, and he lives directly across from me. He would be able to see when I leave for work and when I come home." Ryan frowned, his protective instincts clearly engaged. "Let me look him up." He pulled out his phone and started searching online. Ryan worked in cybersecurity and had access to databases and search techniques beyond what the average person could do. I watched as his expression changed from concentration to concern. "Faustina," he said, finally turning his phone to show me the screen. "Is this your neighbor?" The screen displayed a mugshot of Jack Anderson alongside a news article from about 5 years ago. The headline read, "Local man charged with stalking and breaking and entering." My stomach dropped as I recognized the face in the photo. It was undeniably Jack, though his hair was longer in the mugshot, and he looked younger. According to the article, he had been convicted of breaking into a woman's apartment multiple times and stealing personal items. He had served 18 months in prison. "That's him," I whispered, feeling sick. "That's definitely him." Ryan scrolled through more search results, his jaw tightening. "He has a pattern. There are at least 2 other cases here. Women living alone, reports of break-ins where nothing valuable was taken." The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. Jack hadn't moved into the neighborhood by coincidence. He had targeted me, a woman living alone. He had been watching me, learning my routines. And then, he had been entering my home regularly, touching my things, invading my privacy in the most intimate way. "We need to call the police right now," Ryan said, already dialing. But I put my hand on his arm, stopping him. "Wait! What will we tell them that we Googled my neighbor and found out he has a record? They already know someone broke in. They said there's not much they can do without evidence." "This changes things, Faustina. This guy is a known offender with a specific pattern that matches exactly what's happening to you." "But we don't have proof it's him," I insisted. "We need to catch him in the act." Ryan looked skeptical. "You want to set a trap for a convicted stalker? That's dangerous, Faust." "Not for me," I clarified. "I won't be here, but the cameras will be." Slowly, a plan began to form. We would install the security cameras as soon as they arrived tomorrow. I would pretend to leave for a business trip, making it obvious to anyone watching that I would be gone for several days. In reality, I would stay at a nearby hotel, monitoring the cameras and waiting. "If he breaks in again, we'll have video evidence." I explained. "Concrete proof to give to the police." Ryan didn't like it, but he had to admit it made sense. The police needed more than suspicion to act, especially since Jack had not actually taken anything valuable or physically harmed me. "I don't want you doing this alone," he insisted. "I'll stay with you at the hotel." "You have work, Ryan. I'll be fine. I'll just be sitting in a hotel room watching security footage, and I'll call the police the second I see anything." We spent the rest of the evening making plans. Ryan would install the security system tomorrow after work. I would book a hotel room nearby and pack an overnight bag, and then we would wait for Jack to make his move. As Ryan prepared to leave, he gave me another hug, this one even tighter than the first. "Be careful, Faust," he said. "This guy is dangerous. If anything feels wrong, call me immediately." "I will," I promised, "and thank you for coming so quickly." After Ryan left, I gathered Jasper into my arms, feeling his warm, vibrating purr against my chest. For the first time since discovering the intrusions, I felt a sense of control returning. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I was fighting back, and soon I would have proof of exactly who had been violating my home and my sense of safety. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, despite everything. The new locks made me feel more secure, and the knowledge that soon I would have answers gave me a strange sense of peace. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of reclaiming my home and my life. The next morning, I called my office and requested emergency personal leave for the rest of the week, citing a family situation that required my immediate attention. My supervisor was understanding, especially given my track record of rarely taking time off. "Take whatever time you need, Faustina," she said. "We can reschedule your client meetings." With that arranged, I called Martha and filled her in on the plan, speaking loudly enough that if Jack was paying attention, he might overhear. "Yes, I'm leaving for Chicago this afternoon," I said, standing near my open kitchen window. "The conference lasts until Sunday, so I'll be gone for 4 days." Martha, who was in on the plan, played along perfectly. "Do you need a ride to the airport?" "No, I've got an Uber coming at 2. I should probably start packing soon." After hanging up, I made a show of pulling my suitcase from the hall closet and moving around the house collecting items as if preparing for a trip. I even printed out a fake boarding pass and left it partially visible on the kitchen counter. Ryan arrived around noon with the security system we had ordered. It was more sophisticated than I had expected. Small, discrete cameras that could be mounted in corners or disguised as ordinary objects. There were outdoor cameras for the front and back doors, plus indoor cameras for the living room, kitchen, and upstairs hallway. "I've installed these before," Ryan assured me as he unboxed the equipment. "They're motion activated and will send alerts to your phone. The app lets you view all the cameras at once or focus on any individual feed." We spent the afternoon installing the system, carefully positioning each camera for maximum coverage while ensuring they weren't immediately noticeable. The outdoor cameras were disguised as part of the porch light fixtures, while the indoor ones were small enough to blend into bookshelves and cabinet tops. By 1:30 p.m, everything was set up and tested. I could see live feeds from all 7 cameras on my phone, and the motion detection was working perfectly. "Remember," Ryan said, as he helped me carry my suitcase to the car again, speaking just loudly enough to be overheard, "call me when you land in Chicago, and don't worry about the house. I'll drive by occasionally to check on things." I nodded, playing along with our charade. "Thanks for house-sitting while I'm gone. Jasper's food is in the pantry." This was another part of our plan. Ryan wasn't actually going to stay at the house, but we wanted Jack to think someone might stop by occasionally. In reality, Jasper would be staying with Martha for the next few days. I got into my car with the suitcase, waved goodbye to Ryan, and drove away. Anyone watching would assume I was headed to the airport. Instead, I drove to a hotel about 15 minutes from my house, checked in under a different name, another of Ryan's security precautions, and settled in to wait. The hotel room was basic but comfortable: a queen bed, a small desk, and a bathroom. I set up my laptop on the desk, connecting to the hotel's Wi-Fi and logging into the security app. All 7 camera feeds appeared on the screen, showing my empty house from different angles. I zoomed in on the front door camera, which had a partial view of Jack's house across the street. There was no sign of activity. Now came the hardest part: waiting. I ordered room service for dinner, not wanting to leave in case something happened. Ryan called to check in, and Martha texted to let me know Jasper was settling in at her place. I tried to distract myself with a book, but my attention kept returning to the security feeds on my laptop. The first day passed with no activity. I watched as the sun set, and my house grew dark, automatic timers turning lights on and off to give the impression someone was home. There was no sign of Jack or anyone else approaching my property. By the second day, I was beginning to doubt our plan. What if Jack had somehow realized it was a setup? What if he had moved on to a different target? I found myself pacing the hotel room, checking the camera feeds obsessively. "Maybe we were wrong," I told Ryan during our evening call. "Maybe it wasn't him." "Give it time," Ryan advised. "If he's been getting into your house regularly, he'll try again soon." The morning of the 3rd day, I woke up feeling discouraged. I had taken time off work, spent money on a hotel and security system, all based on a hunch that might be completely wrong. I was considering packing up and going home when my phone buzzed with an alert. Motion detected, front door camera. My heart racing, I opened the app and switched to the live feed. There, clearly visible on my front porch, was Jack. He was casually looking around as if checking whether anyone was watching. Then he moved out of view of the camera. I quickly switched to the side yard camera and saw him making his way toward the back of the house. He was wearing gloves and carrying a small bag. This wasn't someone checking on a neighbor's house. This was someone preparing to break in. With trembling hands, I called Ryan. "He's here. Jack is at my house right now, trying to get in the back door." "I'm calling the police," Ryan said immediately. "Keep watching the feeds and record everything." I switched to the back door camera just in time to see Jack pull out what looked like a small toolkit. He worked on the lock with practiced movements, and despite the new deadbolt, within minutes he had managed to open the door. I felt sick watching him enter my home so easily, so confidently. This wasn't the first time he had done this. It was just the first time I was witnessing it. Switching between the indoor cameras, I tracked Jack's movement through my house. He moved with purpose, clearly familiar with the layout. First, he went to my living room, running his fingers over the throw blanket I often used. Then, he moved to the kitchen, opening my refrigerator and helping himself to a drink from my water pitcher. The casual way he made himself at home made my skin crawl. This wasn't just a break-in, it was a violation, an invasion of the most personal kind. Jack then headed upstairs, and I switched to the hallway camera. He went straight to my bedroom, out of view of the cameras. I cursed myself for not installing one in the bedroom itself, though the thought of having a camera there had seemed too intrusive at the time. After about 10 minutes, Jack re-emerged in the hallway, now carrying something in his hand. As he moved back toward the stairs, I could see it was a piece of my clothing, a scarf I often wore to work. He brought it to his face and inhaled deeply, an action so disturbing I felt physically ill. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, Jack did something unexpected. He pulled a small bag from his pocket and removed what looked like a tiny device. With methodical precision, he attached it behind a picture frame on my living room wall. I realized with horror that he was installing a camera of his own. Just then, my phone rang. It was Ryan. "Police are on their way," he said urgently. "Are you still watching? What's he doing?" "He's installing some kind of camera in my living room," I said, my voice shaking. "He took one of my scarves and he smelled it, Ryan, like he was savouring it." Ryan swore under his breath. "The police said they're about 5 minutes out. They're approaching without sirens." "I can still see him," I reported, switching between camera feeds. "He's in my office now, looking through my desk drawers." The next 5 minutes were the longest of my life. I watched as Jack methodically went through my personal papers, occasionally pocketing small items. A photo of me from my desk, a pen I often used. Little things I might not have immediately noticed were missing. Then I heard it through the camera's audio, the sound of car doors closing outside. Jack heard it too. His head snapped up and he moved quickly to the front window, peering out cautiously through the blinds. I saw the moment he realized what was happening. His body tensed and he immediately headed for the back door, the same way he had entered. But it was too late. The outdoor camera showed police officers already positioned at both the front and back of the house. "Police, open the door!" came a shout from the front porch. Jack froze in the kitchen, clearly weighing his options. For a terrifying moment, I thought he might try to fight or run. Instead, he schooled his features into a mask of calm and walked to the front door, opening it with the confidence of someone who belonged there. "Can I help you, officers?" I heard him ask, his voice smooth and unruffled. "Sir, please step outside with your hands where we can see them," the officer ordered. Jack complied but continued his act. "Is something wrong? I'm just checking on my neighbour's house while she's away." "Sir, we have reason to believe you've entered this residence illegally. Do you have permission to be here?" "Of course," Jack said easily. "Faustina asked me to water her plants. We're friends." The lie made my blood boil. I had never asked Jack to do anything, had barely spoken more than a few sentences to him in all our brief encounters. "Sir, please put your hands behind your back. You're being detained while we investigate." I watched through the outdoor camera as the officers handcuffed Jack, who was still maintaining his innocent act. One officer led him to a police car, while others entered my house to investigate. My phone rang again. It was Officer Rivera from the original break-in report. "Ms. Campbell, we have a suspect in custody at your residence. He claims to have permission to be there. Can you confirm whether that's true?" "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "I never gave Jack Anderson or anyone else permission to enter my home. I have video evidence of him breaking in and installing some kind of camera in my living room." "We found that," Officer Rivera confirmed, "along with several items of yours in his possession. We'll need you to come identify what belongs to you and give a statement." "I'll be there in 15 minutes, I said, already gathering my things. As I drove home, a mix of emotions washed over me. Relief that Jack had been caught, anger at his violation of my space, and lingering fear about what might have happened if we hadn't set up the cameras. When I pulled into my driveway, the scene was surreal. 2 police cars with flashing lights were parked outside my house, and several of my neighbours had gathered on the sidewalk watching with curious expressions. And there, sitting in the back of one of the police cars, was Jack, his eyes locked on me as I exited my vehicle. The look he gave me sent chills down my spine, not anger or shame at being caught, but something possessive, almost intimate, as if we shared a secret. I quickly looked away and approached Officer Rivera, who was waiting on my front porch. He had these on him, she said, showing me a small evidence bag containing my scarf, a photograph from my desk, and several other small personal items. Those are mine, I confirmed, none of which I gave him permission to take. We also found this, she added, holding up the small camera Jack had been installing. It's a wireless camera that would have transmitted to his phone or computer. The realization of what Jack had been planning, to watch me in my own home without my knowledge, made me feel physically ill. We'll need you to come to the station to make a formal statement, Officer Rivera explained. And there's something else you should know. When we ran his name, we found he has a prior record for similar offences. I know, I admitted. My brother found that information online yesterday. That's why we set up our own cameras. Officer Rivera nodded. Smart move. That video evidence is going to be crucial for the case against him. As Jack was driven away in the police car, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. He was caught. There was evidence. He wouldn't be able to enter my home again. But as I looked at my house, the home I had loved so much, I wondered if I would ever feel completely safe there again. The following weeks were a blur of police statements, evidence cataloguing, and legal procedures. The case against Jack Anderson was strong. The video evidence from my security cameras showed him clearly breaking into my home and taking my possessions without permission. When police searched his house with a warrant, what they found was even more disturbing. Jack had created what the detective described as a shrine dedicated to me. Photos taken with a telephoto lens through my windows, showing me in various rooms of my house. A collection of items stolen during his break-ins. Hair from my brush, a toothbrush underwear from my laundry basket, pages torn from my journal. There was even a detailed log of my daily schedule, noting when I left for work and returned home, which friends visited, what deliveries I received. The extent of his obsession was terrifying. He had been watching me for months, learning everything about my life and invading my space in the most intimate ways possible. The evidence from Jack's house, combined with his prior convictions, made the case straightforward. He was charged with multiple counts of breaking and entering stalking theft and installation of surveillance equipment without consent. Given his previous record, the prosecutor was confident he would serve significant prison time. But knowing Jack would be punished didn't erase the violation I had experienced. Every room in my house felt tainted. I couldn't look at my bed without wondering if he had lain in it when I was gone. I couldn't use my shower without imagining him standing in the same space. Every personal item seemed compromised, touched by unwanted hands. After much soul-searching and conversations with both Ryan and Martha, I made the difficult decision to sell my house. It was no longer the sanctuary I had worked so hard to create. It had become a reminder of vulnerability and violation. Are you sure about this? Martha asked, as she helped me pack up my kitchen. This house meant so much to you. I'm sure, I said carefully, wrapping a coffee mug in newspaper. I keep expecting to see him every time I look out the window. I jump at every sound. This isn't home anymore. Ryan helped me find a new place, a secure apartment building in the city with a 24-hour doorman's security cameras throughout the common areas and an electronic key fob system for entry. It was smaller than my house and considerably more expensive, but the security features made it worth every penny. Moving was bittersweet. I had to part with some furniture that wouldn't fit in the new space, and the garden I had lovingly tended would now belong to someone else. But as the last box was carried out, I felt a sense of closure. Jack hadn't just taken my sense of safety, he had taken the joy I once found in that house. It was time to start fresh. Jasper adjusted to apartment living better than I expected. He seemed to enjoy watching the street activity from the large windows, and without a yard to monitor, he became more focused on indoor play. His previous fearful behavior disappeared once we left the house, confirming my belief that animals can sense when something is wrong in their environment. In the months that followed, I found myself drawn to resources for victims of stalking and home invasion. I joined an online support group where I could share my experiences with others who understood the unique violation of having one's personal space invaded. These connections became a lifeline as I worked through the trauma of what had happened. Through the support group, I learned about the psychological impact of stalking, the way it disrupts one's sense of safety and autonomy, the hypervigilance that develops, the difficulty trusting others. Recognizing these patterns in my own behavior helped me address them more effectively in therapy. My therapist, Dr. A. Collins, specialized in trauma recovery. What you're experiencing is normal, she assured me during our sessions. Your home is supposed to be your safe place. When that safety is violated, it affects your entire sense of security in the world. Slowly, with professional help and the support of Ryan Martha and my new friends from the support group, I began to heal. The nightmares became less frequent. I stopped checking the locks multiple times before bed. I could leave my apartment without worrying about who might be watching me. 6 months after the arrest, Jack's case went to trial. I testified about the break-ins, the stolen items, and the impact his actions had had on my life. Sitting in the courtroom, looking at him directly for the first time since his arrest, I was struck by how ordinary he appeared. There was nothing in his appearance that signaled the obsession and violation he was capable of. The jury found him guilty on all counts, and the judge sentenced him to 8 years in prison with mandatory psychological treatment. The prosecutor informed me he would likely serve at least 5 years before being eligible for parole, and upon release would be prohibited from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of me. The verdict brought relief, but not complete closure. I had learned that safety is never guaranteed, that privacy can be invaded, that trust must be given cautiously. But I had also discovered my own resilience, my ability to rebuild after devastation. A year after Jack's arrest, I started a blog sharing my experience and offering advice on home security, particularly for women living alone. What began as personal therapy evolved into a platform reaching thousands of readers. I received messages daily from people thanking me for helping them feel less alone in their experiences, or for motivating them to take security precautions they had previously neglected. I also began volunteering with a local organisation that helps install security systems for low-income individuals who have experienced stalking or domestic violence. Using my own experience, I could offer both practical advice and emotional understanding to others going through similar situations. The violation I experienced changed me in profound ways, but I refused to let it define me. I had lost my house, but I had reclaimed my sense of agency. I had experienced invasion, but I had discovered strength I didn't know I possessed. I had been victimized, but I had emerged a survivor determined to help others. My new apartment gradually became home. I decorated it with intention, choosing items that brought joy and comfort. I established new routines that made me feel secure. I built community with my neighbours, finding safety in connection rather than isolation. Jack took something precious from me, the blissful ignorance that allowed me to feel completely safe in my surroundings. But he couldn't take my ability to rebuild, to find joy, to create meaning from suffering. In trying to possess me, he ultimately pushed me toward a life of greater purpose and deeper connections. If you've ever experienced a violation of your personal space or privacy, know that the fear and anger you feel are valid. Know that healing isn't linear, that some days will be harder than others, but also know that you can reclaim your sense of safety, your joy, your power. Have you ever had to trust your instincts when something felt wrong? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your home should be your sanctuary, so do whatever it takes to make it feel that way again.